Um, Good to sort of see everyone. I hope, is the sound quality okay again tonight? I know last night it was okay. It's been a problem lately, but I think the internet's probably okay. See that thumbnail? Do you know what that was about? I mean, I think I said, but so I went to go get the parasite tests in Tennessee today, and we're walking down by the river, and we see this like writhing white bubbly mess on the ground with this caterpillar under it, and it was a caterpillar with a parasitical fungus being eaten by maggots. So I just thought that was really synchronistic and weird, and it also kind of seems like an indication to me that we will very likely have a positive test. So sound quality, anybody? Is it okay? Somebody tell me. Because it was really bad the other day. I mean, it was like hissing, and I would rather just not do this if it's as bad. Sounds good? Okay, thank you. All right, so what were our subjects anyways tonight? Okay, zero. Yeah, this is a cool thing, you know. I mean, I talk about how everything contains this contradiction, which is of course borrowed from Crowley, the phrasing at least, you know, but it's just an obvious fact if you're observing anything, I think. And so my last video about the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, I was talking a lot about the power of symbols to transcend regular language. By symbols, you know, I mean symbols that aren't letters that are meant to convey something, right? Letters are symbols too, but you know, symbols like a zero or a pentagram or the Hebrew is a little bit different because it has those layers of meaning sort of intrinsically built into the symbols, you know, because they're a dalet is a door and it's a number and it's also a letter. And then if you include the final version, so like certain letters at the end of words have a different value if they're at the end, they're called finals. And then there are also like dots and slashes that will change the sound and the value. So you actually have a lot of potential mileage with Hebrew characters in terms of the ability to compress meaning into a symbol and have like layers of meaning. And I've always said that, you know, lyricists like Maynard James Keenan from Tool is really good at this. When you can, you're writing and there are three layers of meaning that are, you know, and I'm talking about, you know, especially when it's not like a big stretch. They're just like really present layers of meaning. That this is like an indication that it's like it indicates the presence of divinity. That the person that's creating this art is very much tuned in, tapped in, however you want to put it. So, long story sort of short, I was thinking about zero last night because I'm always thinking about zero, that naughty naught that created the universe, the nothingness from which everything still, I think, depends for its existence. Antinomies are like anchors. They are birthing their opposites, you know, and so zero, if you think about it, it has a line that goes around the outside. It's a circle, and it has no end. So it's, you know, a symbol for the infinite, and it is the infinite. And that's the thing about symbols, you know. The circle around the space in the symbol for zero is not just a symbol for infinity, it is infinity. If it is infinite, it contains everything, you know, it is infinity. It's not just a pictographical representation or a hieroglyph or whatever, you know. And so the space inside of the circle is nothingness. So this absolute like pinnacle of revelations of the gnosis, this relationship between antinomies and the sort of absolute foundational role of this nothingness, this zero, and its relationship to infinity are expressed in this symbol. And I just thought it was truly extraordinary, and I think it's also worthy of considering that that probably was not done consciously and deliberately. I think that these kind of deep fundamental truths kind of bubble up through the subconscious and the collective mind, and they are just kind of imbued. And as I was saying about the lyrics, that when they have these layers and layers of meaning and a lot of substance, and they're coming from that place of divinity, they're usually also people that create like that generally say that it's not very deliberate. But I think that what I was getting at with that is the same is true of these symbols. So because this zero in its fundamental meaning and in its essence is so close to this core divine truth, that it can't help but express it. It's just a matter of proximity giving form to this symbol. And I also wonder if I'd like to look into how many cultures exactly use that symbol to represent zero, and if there are other. And also it's interesting that zero wasn't even a concept until all of the other numbers had, there was already a number line, and zero was not even conceptualized. There was no idea about nothing at some early stage in the development of mathematics. And then I had some more sort of pseudo revelations along the lines of spirals. And it's kind of the same thing, because viewed from above, spiral is sort of like it's like a zero in process, right? It's like an expanding zero. It's a zero with movement. It is, but okay, so let's see if I can, and I almost don't want to talk about it because it's like one of those ideas that hasn't really fully congealed in my mind yet. But, the Fibonacci sequence and the ever-present presence of the omnipresence, yeah, that's the good way to put it, of spirals in nature, in form. I was thinking about the zero, and that kind of led to this other revelation regarding spirals, and how there are these grand spirals. Yeah, and basically the crazy thing is that the symbol visually represents what you just wrote, and probably not by design, although I can't be sure of that. Okay, so the spiral thing. I was thinking about how, there's this interplay of opposites, and also there is this equal and opposite reaction thing. There's this concept of a veil, and a lot of people say, including myself, that the veil between worlds, things are reversed, like when you're looking in a mirror. And so it occurred to me that this revolution around the spiral relative to the center are like these sort of phases that are opposites. And so in life, somebody once told me, I think some random guy on the street, one of the secrets is not to let it bounce you around too much. Because when you're in the center of the spiral, that's what alignment really is. And you're relating to the opposites that are sort of on the extremes that are oscillating around you. But you're maintaining a sort of, your line. And I think that the spiraling oscillation can happen across lifetimes, across incarnations. So you may be a sex fiend in one life, and then as you oscillate to the other side of the spiral, you're celibate, and these phases happen in the cycles of life, and then there are small cycles, small spirals within grander spirals. We'll talk more about that later, because obviously I haven't totally sussed it out. I have this crazy visual of the sort of the spiral, but there's a line in the middle, and there's kind of a net with a sort of opposite like it phases in opposites, polarity, I guess, on both sides of the center of the spiral. But I'll have to work on that and get back to you. So one of you guys asked about, because I put out this lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, and one of the things that people will tell you is that because you are cleansing your microcosm of unwanted elements, of things that don't serve you, of energies and ideas that are toxic, and you're repelling them. And if you're doing as I would recommend that it's practiced, where you're invoking those elements and energies and like formats of consciousness into your circle in the morning, and then banishing the unwanted stuff at night every single day, you don't have to even believe that you're compelling energy to do anything. That sort of magical element in that sense is not even required for this practice to be efficacious. And that's one of the reasons I promote the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram so much, is because it doesn't matter if magic is real or not. Even just as a practice for sorting and assimilating experience, and if you are constantly going through your entirety of your being, which is, that's really the great service that dividing the quadrants into four, and then you have all these associations with each of the directions. Each of the God names has a different association. You're making these vibrations that are sort of instilling the ideas, imprinting them into your being in the same way I think that, when you make a record, it's kind of how it's done. And also, when you take psilocybin mushrooms, there's this really loud buzz that you can feel oftentimes. And Terrence McKenna's brother Dennis said that he thinks that it is an actual physical vibration that has a couple of purposes. That is sort of like tenderizing the brain so that neuroplasticity and neurogenesis have an easier job, and it's sort of like detoxifying, shaking things that have collected on the outside of the brain loose and into the bloodstream, where they can be yeah, well, I mean, what is that? It's two symbols, and that's it. That's basically the basis of this spiral. And thank you, Fernando, because I hadn't really thought about that. I think what I was describing is not just the infinity symbol, but the equal and opposite energetic spirals that are arising from each of those zeros, and creating the movement and the processes that this infinity is generating, and that's awesome too, to actually be working out these. So maybe it's not bad that I don't come to the table always with fully formulated ideas, because you guys can help me. And that was always something that I was hoping to accomplish with this channel, that people would actually work together in meaningful ways to create a new world, really, but a new ontology is a good step in that direction. But anyways, so this vibration, and so I think that, the vibration, you could even see it as, Terrence McKenna was a neuroscientist. I mean, Dennis McKenna. Did I say Dennis? Dennis McKenna. So it's not like he's just some guy theorizing, he's a brain scientist. And so, just on a biophysical basis, or just a physical basis and a psychological basis through meditation, there's a lot of potential in this ritual. And I think the vibration, as I was saying, could even help to sort of, you're focusing on these things that you're bringing in or banishing, and you're like vibrating your brain so it's in a more receptive state, if Dennis is correct about what vibration does to the brain. And so what you'll discover oftentimes is a number of things will happen. Relationships will dissolve. Your job might blow up in your face. You know, all sorts of chaos will erupt. And a lot of people will abandon their consciousness practice or their magical practice. And not so much anymore. I think people are getting over the old superstitious association, the influence of Christianity, telling them that these kind of things might be bad and evil and satanic. Just period. Not, you know, not like dark magic is satanic, but I think the general perception from the most Christians is that it's just all bad. Um, you know what I mean? So it's like you do this benign, innocuous thing, and it's actually helping you, but the people immediately experience the chaos, make the association, and abandon the practice. And the reality is that you have to just push through because in order for there to be any kind of progress, any kind of creation of something new, the dissolution of the old form in order to create space to facilitate, you know, something new arising. Like the change can't happen without movement, and there is no movement without space. Yeah, well, we'll get to the dark night of the soul and depression and all of that because that is another thing that can be triggered by this, and it definitely hit me really hard because I had a very, 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 very intense process. Well, that caterpillar on the thumbnail won't be turning into a butterfly. That's one dead motherfucker. But but the maggots and the fungus are dead too, actually, because the sun was so intense out there. By the time we got back from town on the canoe, he had completely fried, and the maggots were fried too. Anyways, where were we at with this? We were getting to the because okay, so because you know you have all these magical experiences, precognitions, you know, synchronicities, all this incredible shit is happening to you during the Phoenix process, I call it, or the peak of your awakening. You have expanded the parameters of what is available to you in terms of experience. And what happens a lot of times is it suddenly stops. And it is absolutely terrifying. It's horrible. You feel that you may have imagined it all, that you lost your mind, or that you'll never connect with it again. You'll never experience that degree of magic and beauty and transcendental amazingness ever again. And oftentimes, I think that actually turns out to be true. And it is also said, and in my experience, this is true as well, is that there is a period for everyone that is more intense, and it doesn't ever come back around to that intensity. And so, you know, that of course messes with me to this day. But I think that's a big part when people talk about the peak and valley experience of the mystic. This stuff, it ebbs and flows. Terence McKenna kind of had a way of talking about it, the novelty theory that he had described. Whether it's legitimate or not is definitely called into question because his mathematics were apparently intentionally rigged. But I think at least in theory, he was onto something. I think it is true in my experience at least. And if you think about, you know, if I'm correct, and I've noticed there are a lot of other people that are on the same track with this, that electromagnetic energy is what is fundamentally responsible for our consciousness and also for the experience of manifestation or apparent manifestation and synchronicity. Well, that's more about symmetry, but also the electromagnetism. These are oscillations. And I think that what we find when we look at the universe, for example, in the Fibonacci sequence, we have the same structures and the same processes engaged, whether we're talking about a seashell or a galaxy, you know, or the universe, these spirals. And so the oscillating wave of our consciousness has big and small scale aspects to it. And so I think that these hill and valley experiences are in the nature of oscillations, and that's why they tend to come and go. So, and you know, there's a lot to it. You know, I mean, Yeah, well, and that's interesting because I was just saying in a live stream the other day that Japanese guy that did the fake science with the ice crystals, that came up somehow, and I said, it's really unfortunate that he did this like fake science because it probably is a legitimate idea, and it sounds like that has been confirmed. That's what I'm gathering from the comment there. Uh, okay, so um, we're talking about lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, also the middle pillar, but really any time that you expand your consciousness. I mean, this happens to people that smoke DMT, especially because I think if you're part of the older generation, you if you were exposed to like the late 80s and early 90s drug war kind of hysteria, you have it in the back of your mind that you take psychedelics and you go insane. And um, I think that what actually happens is that the filters that generally screen out the majority of the sensory input in the universe, um, yeah, well, revelations are always happening. I mean, if you mean revelation, the apocalypse, I think it's important to remember that the word apocalypse actually just means revelation. And in that sense, I certainly do agree that revelation is coming. It's always coming. Um, and I think it's also fair to say that we are in a position where we either have to move on into a new world, we have to create a new world guided by a different set of priorities and principles, or we're going to destroy the one that we're on and everything in it. So, yeah, the apocalypse is here. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. In fact, that's really the only book of the Bible that I've ever really liked. Um, Okay, so the DMT thing, though, people, Daniel Pinchbeck called it an occult hangover. People report, increased synchronicities, experiences of precognition, all this weird, crazy stuff. I remember even hearing several hippies over the years tell me, like, man, I teleported on LSD one time, and I'm like, man, you were fucking high. You're not teleporting anywhere. But a couple of months ago, yeah, the world will be fine. You're right. The world ain't going anywhere. Um, I I did it. I mean, that's at least how I experienced it, and I have no good explanation. I mean, and that was the first thing I thought. Once I gotten over the initial shock, like, holy shit, the hippie was telling the truth. And I think it could be as simple as once you have engaged more of the brain, your ability to like transubstantiate and turn into light. I don't know. Maybe I was just tripping, but it didn't even take that much. And um, but the point is that we are definitely, I think, we know that we are for certain using more of our brain. They've done brain scans and they can see that. And so people smoke DMT and they have the same kind of experience that people that practice magic have. They start having these synchronicities and they have all these experiences that they have been programmed to believe are symptoms of insanity. And in fact, they are reminiscent of schizophrenia. In fact, some anthropologists use a term called essential schizophrenia to describe the psychological state of shaman and to distinguish between violent schizophrenia or paranoid schizophrenia. Essential schizophrenia, of course, implies that it's good and that we can use it for stuff. And it's basically about transcending our illusory vantage point of from a single ego and becoming part of the universal consciousness and having access to that greater perspective. Um, Very well documented remote viewing and all of this sort of thing with shamans all throughout the centuries. Uh, and so um, that is the first thing to contend with. And I am a very out of the box person, and I was expecting some weird, crazy experiences. I mean, I've never really disbelieved in aliens, or I've always been open to the possibility that there could be something like spirits, or, I mean, I heard a little girl crying in my closet before I found out that a little girl had been burned to death in my bedroom when I was a kid. I mean, what the hell is that? My friend heard it too. He told me the next morning, man, I heard this little girl crying last night, and so we both heard it, and you know what I mean. So I mean, I'm very open to stuff. I try to maintain skepticism, but it was a lot for me even to deal with, and I honestly don't think I did really that well compared to how I would expect. If I had really grabbed the bull by the horns and used all of the wisdom that I had, what I think I could have done with this when it was at its peak, it's really hard for me to even think about. And I think that's a very common experience. It's very, very overwhelming. And even for a non-matrix mind person like myself, I was worried that I was going insane. It really freaked me out because the synchronicities and the other things that occurred were so like something out of a Stephen King movie or something. It went like as close to that line of impossible that our experience can without actually crossing it, because nothing will do that, right? But we were talking about 11/11 one night, and my girlfriend's using this ruler, and she's a 23-inch ruler, and she's getting frustrated, and finally she notices that there's two 11s printed on the ruler. Like, this is a physical object that is, involved with this synchronicity. It's not like these things would just happen and then they'd be gone and I could forget about it. They were solid physical things. A couple days later, I was working on a house, and I pulled a piece of, we were tearing the roof overhang off, and I pulled a piece of, insulation out, and my girlfriend had just called and told me that she had taken pictures of bears in the front yard, and bear claws fell out from behind the insulation as soon as I got off the phone. So stuff like that was just happening just constantly. And I don't care who you are, if you've been raised in this matrix, you're conditioned that is what reality is. Even if you have known better your whole life, at least in my experience, it was still a shock to really, really experience that it's not what we are conditioned to perceive it to be. It was really difficult for me to really absorb. And then the next element of this awakening process that is extremely dangerous is that you do start to access your intuition to a degree that is much more powerful than previously. I did things like, I told my friends I wanted to go talk to Danny Carey from Tool because I knew he had been studying the same kind of occult traditions much longer than me. I knew that he had been a rock star for 25 years or however long it had been at that point, and that he had access to, secret societies that I wouldn't and whatnot. So I thought I'd really like to talk to that guy, and I had experienced all of these enhanced capacities of consciousness. So as an experiment one day, I just told my friends, I'm going to go talk to Danny Carey, got in my car and drove straight to him. And I actually had a conversation with him. Now I understand that was just electromagnetism that, you know what I mean? I actually have a working mechanistic explanation for that experience. But, once you have done a few things like that where I didn't stalk him. I didn't go, you know what I mean? I just went straight to him. Like straight. We got stuck in Vegas for a while, which is that element of it kind of makes me feel like there's something bigger also that kind of influences things so that they work out right. Because the timing was crazy. It was just perfect that I arrived exactly where he arrived at the same time. And yeah, the last video I made about it, I didn't tell the story very well. It was the night after San Pedro up on top of a mountain. And I just felt really good, but I don't think I was that lucid. So I hadn't slept even that night. You're right, I should remake that video. But the point is that when you have done this a bunch of times and it's been correct consistently, you can start to think that every single thought you have is a precognition. And then you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. They're called wish demons. Everything that you want to believe is going to happen, you will believe will happen. along those same lines, I started to notice that it did actually seem like I could manifest things. It's not like I could just like imagine a Lamborghini and there would be one in my driveway or $1 million in my bank account or some kind of crazy thing like that. But if it was within the realm of possibility, even if it was extremely improbable, these things would happen. And every time it seemed like they were already there before you even asked for them. And just really just very specific. And I was doing it intentionally as well. So, I mean, for example, I wanted to start a band and it had to be a certain type of band. So I needed a certain type of musician that more or less didn't exist. And I was in a relatively small town. And I discovered very, very rapidly that I already knew all the people that I needed and they were right around me. And then, you know, I was single, so I was like, okay, well, I want a girl this age, this color hair, rich parents that are willing to throw money at this project. And 2 weeks later, she's in my house, we're engaged, her mom's asking me how much money I need to promote the band or whatever. And it was insane, you know, it was absolutely insane. But of course, I took it too far, and I started to lose the ability to distinguish between, and I started to think that I could just make anything happen that I thought. And luckily, I never went too over the deep end, but it did definitely cause some moderate to major calamities for sure. And even today, one of you guys, I don't know if you're still there, I hadn't seen in a while. I think I made you mad. I've done it before, and and I thought he's gonna see you know, these thumbnails I've been making lately, and realize I'm not talking about that stuff anymore, and he's gonna be back. And for the first time, about 10 minutes after I had that thought, his name was in the chat. So. It's a real thing, you know, but this is where I think one of the main reasons that people get lost with this is that we have lost our understanding of the importance of the magician, the seer, the shaman, the mystic, the magician. We don't have a place of importance in our culture for that, like Native Americans do, or indigenous people here in South America, or even white people hella back in the day, right? Like, think about this for a second. Who were the advisors to people like Queen Elizabeth and the other conquerors like Rome and magicians, right? So if intuition doesn't work and magic isn't real and all of this stuff, then why did these empires not just fail immediately? Because that's who they're consulting for everything, right? Like, it's crazy sometimes when you do look at the Matrix narrative and you realize, like, holy shit, this is really obviously stupid. You know, like it doesn't really take much. And you know, I mean, I think that's honestly why we're all locked in our houses, and the internet is super censored, and you know what I mean? It's not got anything to do with, I mean, they didn't lock us down for Ebola, you know? I mean, that was way scarier. What did I do? Okay, so let's talk about ego inflation, because that is another element of the dangers of the spiritual path, especially when you use an accelerant like ritual magic, or especially DMT. DMT is the worst at this, and it can have the opposite effect for sure, man. I mean, when you smoke DMT and you're confronted with the fact that there is some kind of reality that is beyond your, I mean, beyond your comprehension is putting it mildly. Like, we don't even have language to talk about a lot of the stuff that happens in the DMT realm, right? And then, you know, most people are immediately, you follow that, right? The sequitur is, your mind couldn't have generated that, so that means that there's a greater mind. So that is pretty humbling, you know, when you're like, it just really puts you in your place, you know, you're not shit compared to whatever that was, you know what I mean? And it definitely has this presence of like tremendous power and, you know, a lot of age, like really, really old, very, very powerful. And I've always thought, not necessarily benign either. And DMT weirds me out a little bit for sure. But I should also say that none of the entities I've ever encountered with DMT have ever told me to do anything evil or harm me. And I have searched Google, and there's no one that I can find that has ever fucking done anything really terrible on DMT. So I think my suspicion is probably just fear. But the point is that I think when it's not balanced out by the feminine energies of ayahuasca, it oftentimes causes ego explosions, although I have seen ayahuasca do it to people as well. It's just much more uncommon. Usually ayahuasca is successful at humbling people. But in my case, DMT caused massive ego inflation at one point. And to my credit, I guess, I don't know. I mean, the circumstances generally do this to people anyways. I had a lot of insecurities. I was I'd been an outcast my whole life, and I had a very, 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 very low self-esteem, lots of abuse as a child and stuff. And so that sets you up for, you're in a conducive state for ego inflation. And so I had just manifested this band, and suddenly I was getting a ton of attention from all these beautiful women everywhere, and people were putting me on a pedestal because I was also talking like this. It was very, very mystical all the time, and it was coherent, and it made sense, and it sounded like I was correct, and I was telling people that I was going to manifest things or go talk to Danny Carey from Tool, and then I would actually do it. And so the people around me are all just kind of going like, holy shit, man, this guy's a wizard or a prophet. Or, at one point my roommate thought I was the Antichrist, and my girlfriend thought I was Jesus. So it was difficult for me not to have the ego inflation experience because I was just getting bombarded by, motivations. And it really, after the fact, it blew my mind because I thought I was prepared for the ego inflation, that if I ever started to see any kind of success in a band, that I knew that that's what you had to watch out for. So I thought, if I ever am in that position, I'll know better. And it really got to the point where if you even questioned me at all, I would erase you from my life, like on the spot, like you're done. And so our first really important gig, I had been working in these mines up at the top of these mountains, and it was brutal, and it was long days and little sleep, and I had come down. I almost took the day before off work because I knew this would happen, and I didn't get a lot of sleep. I was exhausted, so I thought that taking mushrooms and Vicodin would get me through the show, and it just made it worse. And so I made the mistake of telling the singer that I had taken this stuff, and he told the kids that were like totally straight and they weren't happy about it. And so when everybody came over to my house for practice the next time, they like called me out, and I just fired them. And so things like that were happening that, to this day, I regret that because the bass player's family were like part owners of the whiskey in LA. He was super connected in the music industry. We had it made. We were really, really good. We had a great singer. We had huge connections. There was money behind the band even because of this girl that I was engaged to, her parents, you know what I mean? Like, this was my dream my whole life, and I just thought that I was the one manifesting everything. I was the fucking divine genius here, and I could just manifest a new group, It doesn't matter who you are, that's not how that shit works, right? So it took me a long process of humbling, and, the universe immediately, like, broke one of my fingers, so I couldn't play guitar for a year, like 2 or 3 days after I fired the band. I ripped the end of my finger off, and I couldn't play for a long time, so then I fell back into, like, painkillers, because I couldn't play, and that was for a long time. these are stories from a long time ago. But during that time period, if I wasn't in a band, I was going to go buck nutty and just, too many drugs and just chaos. And So it was just a terrible, terrible thing. And I also think that part of the reason I had the capacity for manifestation that I had is that I had built this charge up for decades. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it was like the culmination of all of this energy, and then I just tossed it away because I just, I'm the one, you know, so I can just replace you guys like they were nothing, you know. So, you know, that's when people talk about the spiritual pitfalls and the traps, and you know, especially if you are looking to access more higher capacities of consciousness in order to accomplish things, which is what I was doing. I was not really seeking after ultimate enlightenment. I was to an extent. I mean, I was obsessed with metaphysics and all of the great questions and stuff since the time I was a very small child. But at that point in my life, it was more about, I felt like I could access the universal mind and therefore become a hollow tube to bring down fire from heaven and access this genius and use it to create this amazing music. And, you know, and I also felt like I could develop my intuition to, you know, there's all kinds of like pragmatic utility for expanded consciousness. And so those are the people that are really going to get themselves in trouble. And the reality is that that's most of us. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's what we're supposed to do. We are expanding our consciousness and developing our ability to compel our experience to take the forms that are, you know, in accordance with our concept of our highest expression of our being in our life, right? We're basically trying to create heaven on earth for ourselves. And so the point of all this is not, I mean, you know, people that are looking to expand their consciousness and to attain to higher levels, you know, most of us do not have any plans to become a monk. We're still going to be interfacing with the regular world, probably having families, needing to survive somehow. And so once you realize that you can transcend everything you hate by accessing these capacities of consciousness, all of the mundane shit, you know, it can get the better of you, which is what happened to me. More than once, I hate to admit. But eventually I learned, of course, but it has taken a lot of work and a lot of suffering, a lot of missed opportunity. You know, there's a hard road to have to learn those things the way that I did. And now that I'm here in South America and I'm struggling with this illness, and you know, I destroyed all these opportunities and all of this crazy stuff, you know. Also, I think I'd had way too much money way too easily for way too long. And I had never been an adult without money. And so it really, you know, it really does seem like all of that stuff that I just told you about, that, you know, it ultimately just kind of exploded. It did ultimately bring me to the place that I needed to arrive at. And for me, that is actually quite remarkable, because people with my kind of background and the kind of violence that I was exposed to and even engaged in, and just the, you know, the poverty and the surroundings, you know, we go to prison and we stay there, you know what I mean? We don't become enlightened and then, you know, change lives and you know what I mean? It's just really extraordinary that I have made it through it, because I should have been doomed by, I think, you know, normal standards. By the way, you guys, please do hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon if you can. We're trying to raise money to go and stay with the local Warani in the Warani village, partly because I need healing. I need to finish my healing and my spiritual journey and go back to the United States and get back with my bass player and make some amazing music. I really feel like those of you that have been following and supporting all this time, I feel like the next year or so is going to really be the big payoff, because I feel like I have, I've learned the lessons. I've finally sort of crystallized into the being that I was sort of projecting. It's like more of a reality now. So I feel like when I do return to my work in the United States, it's going to be something amazing is going to happen. I mean, I can use all of this stuff now without being like Mickey Mouse in the Fantasia movie when he tries to constrain all the brooms to his will, and they. Okay, so I think we've covered it all as far as the spiritual pitfalls, the ego inflation and pride, the hill and valley experience of the mystic, where you're walking between worlds and then suddenly you're not, and it's enough to make you want to die, because I mean, when you're really in the midst of piercing the veil, and you go for a walk at twilight, which is the most intense time for this kind of consciousness, and there are bats flying around your head, and I mean, you're walking up to mother bears with cubs, and they don't mind, and I would walk around in fields, and I thought I was what do you call it, like disappearing basically, and there was like a ring of these blue, I guess, locusts just flying around my waist, and later my girlfriend told me she was worried I was gonna vanish because she could see through me. Like, this is like your day-to-day is just like that, and then suddenly things are normal. So that's really hard. And well, we didn't talk about meditation as well. I mean, that was something that I also really dropped the ball on. Meditation is absolutely essential to making it through this process without detonating or I mean, it's going to be hard at times, and it depends on how far you're taking it. I've always been a pedal to the metal, full throttle, top of the mountain kind of person, and earlier I was talking about the spiral and how you can get bounced back and forth by life. Most people choose to just kind of be moderate and in the middle, because intuitively we all know this stuff. We know that if you're really, really extreme, that you are going to have really, really high highs and really, really low lows. A lot of like career criminals don't mind the really low lows because the high highs are so great. One minute they're in a mansion with a bunch of women and they're high and whatever, and they have everything they want, and they do 5 years in prison. So what? They're going to go out and rob another bank and deal some drugs, and they're going to be in a giant house with a bunch of women again. You know what I mean? So it's like some people are just okay with this, these tremendous bouncings, So just don't think that it's not going to happen. If you're going to push yourself to those kind of extremes and to those kind of heights, then you are going to experience the lows. This is just nature. This is how it is, And my objectives of experiencing things at the razor's edge, to push the envelope and watch it bend. Extremes create their opposites. And moderation just creates moderation. That's exactly it, Fernando. So, I mean, if you're watching this channel, though, this stuff probably applies to you because electromagnetic energy, you just slurp right into the thing where you're supposed to be, I felt like there was one other thing. Yeah, the bouncing back and forth, that's the hill and valley thing. Synchronicities, precognitions, losing your mind. Got to watch out for that. But meditation and lesser banishing ritual of the Pentagram, also tobacco. I didn't talk much about the role that plant medicine can play in this process. And unfortunately, when I was really going through the peak of this, I didn't really have ayahuasca. I didn't know about tobacco, at least the proper use of tobacco. So, you guys out there all have an advantage, because rape can be extremely grounding, snap you right out of, if you're, if you're not grounded, it'll plug you right in. It'll give you roots right on the spot, the right rape, You have to be careful and make sure it's the right plants. But a good grounding rape can really help you get through this. Liquid tobacco in the nose. And also, before the ceremonies, but the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and meditation, a very consistent meditation practice, because the analogy that you're going through life, right? You're a guitar. If you never tune your guitar and then you play it, what does it sound like? You know what I mean? And the mind is the same, and meditation is how you tune it. And so if you're going through this process of accelerated consciousness evolution and you don't tune your guitar, it's kind of like you're playing like really, really aggressive punk rock on the guitar and beating it out of tune like severely and still not tuning it and trying to play it. But within a few days, the strings are just going to be hanging off of the guitar, So if you do take this approach, I think, of using DMT and ritual magic and all of these things at your disposal to really accelerate your conscious evolution journey, you have to take extra precautions and extra measures to ensure that you don't get yourself into trouble. So it's been almost an hour. If you guys have any questions or anything for me, I'll be glad to. Please do hit the like button, share, subscribe. I noticed the last time I said that, no one did it. I do appreciate it. We've been demonetized. If you appreciate this content and you want to help us to get to the Warani and help with my medical bills, we've set up a GoFundMe. I'm going to put another GoFundMe up for the Warani trip because I feel like we need to keep the funding separate. But we want to go in there and learn the language and get to know the people and document it all in video and get that out to the world and help the Warani resistance movement. And we get no money from YouTube. So there's Zelle, PayPal, and cryptocurrency addresses in the description that you can use to offer support. And the Patreon, where I have the ritual magic course that is going up bit by bit. Okay, so the sign of silence. There are a couple of different interpretations of why you need to do that when you're performing the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and making other gestures in magical practice in this tradition. So the sign of Harpocrates. Harpocrates is like the ultimate fool as well. Harpocrates is silence. And remember that we started this conversation by talking about zero. And since it's an infinite circle, we have returned to the subject of nothingness. And so Harpocrates, whose voice is silence, is the hierophant of the operation, for one thing. He's overseeing it. And remember that the motto of the Hermetic magician is to know, to dare, and to be silent. Secrecy and this commitment to secrecy is it's not what people think for the most part, and it's ubiquitous throughout different magical traditions, right? Shamans here in South America keep their rape recipe secret. They'll share their songs because they're healing you with them. But, what the spirits tell them, unless it's relevant to you, is kept secret. Secrecy is just part of all magical practices. And there's a lot of ways to talk about why. One way to put it is that, you have to be careful what you take and careful what you give away. And so anytime that you are expelling something, right, there's going to be a displacement of energy. So you cannot give without receiving. It's not possible. So when you're charging the pentagram and you're releasing this energy, you are receiving another energy. And that energy is going to be congruent with what you are drawing into your space while you're charging the pentagram. And so this gesture of silence is a reminder of your oath of secrecy and your commitment to the secrecy. It's also an acknowledgement of the ineffable and the unspeakable nature of the revelations that you will have in your temple, which is your body and your mind. And it is also a way to seal up the vessel so that what is received is not expelled. And one of the mistakes, the most common mistakes that people make when they're practicing the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, I do this a lot, is to rush through it. But it's very, very important because your state, your energetic state, and the way that it feels more than anything is of the utmost importance when you are vibrating and when you are configuring your energy to how it's going to relate to the energies you're drawing or expelling, right? And so this gesture of silence is also a commitment to inner stillness. It's a reminder of the necessity to have this inner stillness during this moment where you are receiving and integrating the energies that you have invoked, or you are reasserting your previous state when you're banishing. And so the serenity and the silence is serving you in this way at that time. And so another element of it is that in some people's opinion, all of these beings are actually watching while you're performing these things, and it is a decree that thou shalt perform these rituals aright, and that thou shalt maintain secrecy. So there are layers and layers to what the sign of silence is about. And of course, it's also the acknowledgement, it's an acknowledgement of the nature of the ultimate, of being nothingness. So I'm losing my voice. I'm asking you guys one more time, hit the like button, share, subscribe. Please support us on Patreon, Zelle. We need money to go see the Warani, and I feel like it's really important. In fact, I would even say that it's sort of like the culmination of my one part of my life. You know, like this is I've been headed to this very spot since I was 7 years old. Like literally the spot where I'm sitting right here. And I don't think it's the pinnacle, because I think that has to do with music and going back to California. But I think this last bit of healing and experience of drinking ayahuasca with an uncontacted shaman in the jungle is just, it's insane that it's even possible. And I shouldn't say uncontacted, but barely contacted. Still living traditionally. They don't go to town. So no exposure, at least, to the outside world. Pretty crazy. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. If you guys have requests for subjects, live streams, there are email address. There's an email address in the description. You can find me on Facebook. You can join the Facebook groups, Instagram. I keep forgetting to update my Instagram. There's all kinds of my jungle adventures are pretty well documented on Instagram and TikTok. All the monkey encounters that we've had, whatever crazy flowers, caterpillars. I'm catching caterpillars, crazy caterpillars, and letting them chrysalis up, and then I'm tracking, taking pictures of the caterpillar and then the chrysalis and then the emerging butterfly, which is really interesting that I've kind of taken that up, because that's what I'm doing down here, as Fernan mentioned a while ago. Thank you, Charles, for that. You know what I mean? It's like we do these things. The subconscious is making these gestures. So thanks again, you guys, and good night.